Okay, so the next point in Rand is her attempt to talk about two elements in the process of concept formation, right? We know that in concept formation, we said this before, that Rand identifies the role of differentiation and integration. What we're going to see today is more of the role of differentiation. Why is it so important? What does it actually do? One, we're going to see just in a couple of seconds what the role of similarity is, right? What does she mean by similarity? How is similarity used to understand both the increase in conceptual range, but also our access as conscious beings to the truths of reality, to the objectivity, right? The objective nature of the world, right? Okay, so this is similarity and differentiation, right? All right, similarity and differentiation. All right, here's a quote from Rand. She says, quote, "Similarity is the relationship between two or more existences. The relationship between two or more existences which possess the same characteristic but in different measures," right? The similarity, the relationship between two or more, at least two, existences which possess the same characteristic, but in different measures or degrees. Very simple. I did this in a previous video. So two or more, 1, 2, 3, two or more existent entities which possess, two or more existences which possess the same characteristic. What's the shared characteristic? Right? They all share length. Right? They're all representations, manifestations of length. Two or more, quote, "the relationship between two or more existences which possess the same characteristics but in different measures or degrees." So this sort of representation is exactly what she's defining in terms of similarity. Now let's see what we can get from this idea of similarity, right? Why is it important to recognize the role of similarity? Well, in discussing the idea of similarity, right? If I can draw this right. Right? In discussing the idea of similarity, what Rand recognizes, and I think rightfully so, right? What Rand recognizes is that at the perceptual level, meaning the I don't want to say non-cognitive, non-aware, right? The unaware, in an unaware state, in a state where it's just the given, I recognize immediately, without even thinking about it, as part of, in a Kantian sense, right? As part of the conditions with which my mind is structured, variations in length, right? I can tell that these things are roughly the same, and then I can really measure to see that they're exactly the same, that this is shorter, and so on. My mind immediately picks these things up. I don't need to think about it. It doesn't need to be apparent. It doesn't need to be acknowledged. It's a given. So that, okay, there are varying sizes of objects all in my office, right? There are varying shapes in my office, and so on. There are a number of things in my office, quantity and so on. All of this leads me to recognize that there are objects which share similarities, right, in the world. There are objects which are cubes, and I can group a series of objects together that share the characteristic cube, right? All I need to do in order to do that, what she's saying, and I don't think this is debatable, it might be, but I don't think it is I think this is just a very good articulation, is that where I see like attributes, right, where I see the instantiation of an attribute in an object, I recognize immediately that these objects are similar, meaning that the objects share the same attribute, but the manifestation of that attribute in the object differs. This is a bigger cube. This has more volume. This has less volume. This is a longer length. This has less length. This has, and so on, and so on, and so on, right? This is something that my mind does at the perceptual level. I don't need to be cognizant in a sense of that. It's a given. Okay. From that similarity, what we're able to do, because of this recognition and similarity, I'm immediately able to get to a more precise recognition of reality, right? I can, in recognizing that the attribute volume constitutes this cube. Perfect example, right? 2 Rubik's cubes, a 4x4x4, a 3x3x3. I recognize that there is more volume to the 4x. It's bigger. It's a bigger cube than the 3x3. It's a larger, and a 5x5 is bigger than this, right? So I recognize object A, object B, 2 objects given. I'm not thinking about this. I just recognize this immediately, right? And I see that this has the attribute shape, or even cube, right? This has the attribute shape, cube. This has the attribute shape, cube. I recognize that immediately as a given. I recognize that this is bigger than this. You might not be able to see it, but this is bigger than this, right? So this is bigger than this. That's a given, right? So immediately I can, according to Rand, evoke this idea of similarity. Same attribute, shape, cube, different sizes. I immediately take this as a given, and then I can become more specific in my analysis, right? Now if I want to talk about unit construction, I can create a unit of larger cubes, a unit of smaller cubes. I can become more and more precise. I can become as precise as I want to be, right? And I think all that her epistemology, and this might be putting it out there a little bit. This might be, she might not agree with this. I think it's true. And I'm a Godamarian, so interpretation is no one holds the right to interpretation. But I think what you might be able to say of Rand is that Rand's epistemology, she's attempting to make a very flexible, in a sense, epistemology. And by the term flexible, what do I mean? Insofar as we recognize that there are similarities between objects, some of us, me, as a social scientist, I'm not going to be concerned with measuring the difference. That's not something that I'm concerned with, right? A physicist, a geometer, might want to and might take that difference in attribute very, very seriously and spend his or her whole life just measuring the volume of objects, right? The higher order geometries, basically I just want to measure the volume of very complex objects, right? Very complex shapes, the size of things, right? As a philosopher, I might be more interested in just an analysis of the attribute, right? I might not be concerned with the measurement of the thing and the difference in measure. I might be concerned with the attribute length and attempt to articulate sort of the conditions in which length factor into my understanding of the world. And then there's this discourse that happens between the philosopher and the mathematician, and this is where this analysis is going, right? This is what she's attempting to sort of distill. So in that sense, I think her epistemology is very flexible. It's a recognition that, one, there are a lot of things at the perceptual level that are just given. I don't need to be sort of aware of these things. I just know, in a sense. Which is not to say that it's innate, right? I don't think she would say that it's an innate ability. I think she would say that it is a condition for the possibility of my epistemology, right? It's sort of, in a Kantian sense, it's the condition with which my mind is structured. And insofar as I look at the real world, some of us will be interested in the measurements, some of us will be interested in the ontology, right? And so on.